After 5 years of marriage, my name was nowhere to be found on her social media feed, which was instead filled with another man's smiles. It is clear that some people keep an exit strategy ready from the very start. I shouldn't blame myself for being slow to realize it, because all those ignored anniversaries were loud reminders that I was no longer in her heart. I was currently on set, waiting for Sarah to finish her final scenes. Unexpectedly, she posted her first ever photo on Instagram. It was a shot of her and Ari in the dressing room. She was leaning against his shoulder, smiling like a teenage girl head over heels in love. The caption was brief, saying that time flies, but the heart remains the same. We had been married for 5 years, yet she had never once mentioned my existence on any of her social media platforms. Tonight was supposed to be our wedding anniversary, but she was busy attending a victory party for Ari. He was her first love, an A-list star who had just returned from a stint in Hollywood. He was planning to rebuild his career here. I sat alone in a restaurant I had reserved entirely for us, staring at the meticulously prepared dishes. The food had gone ice cold by the time the waiter tentatively approached my table. Should I clear one of the place settings, Director Morrison? I gestured for him to leave and pulled out my phone to send an iMessage. It was to Lily, a rising star I had recently signed. "Are you free? Come have a drink with me." By the time Sarah finally rushed into the restaurant, her heels were clicking loudly on the floor and her breathing was ragged. She found me sitting there, laughing and talking with Lily. With a cold expression, Sarah told the staff to clear the room. Lily stood up gracefully and said that we could discuss the script another time before making her exit. Once the room was empty, Sarah sat down across from me, with visible rage burning in her eyes. She demanded to know what I meant by this, while I continued to cut my steak with agonizing slowness. I told her that since she clearly had more important things to do, I couldn't let such a prime seat go to waste. "Morrison, what do you think I am?" she snapped, asking why I was meeting another woman. She accused me of tossing my wife aside, so I looked up with a faint smile and remarked that it was a surprise she still remembered being my wife. I then asked her if she even knew what today was. Sarah froze instantly, her face draining of all color. I reminded her it was our 5th wedding anniversary as I set down my silverware, my voice turning ice cold. She had forgotten our plans and ditched me to attend a victory party for Ari. She even posted photos of herself hugging him on Instagram, leaving me wondering where I fit into her life. Sarah looked at me with pure disbelief, asking if I was really angry over something so trivial. She asked when I had become so petty, claiming that forgetting an anniversary was no big deal. She argued that Ari had just returned to the country and there was nothing wrong with her showing support. I suddenly felt like laughing as I remembered our first anniversary, when she wouldn't stop clinging to my arm. She had promised that every year from then on would be even sweeter. She had even insisted that I go public on Instagram so that everyone would know Director Morrison was officially off the market. When I asked why she didn't post anything herself, her eyes flickered with hesitation. She claimed that as an actress, it was better to be low-key to avoid accusations of chasing clout. I finally realized that she simply didn't want to upset Ari. Seeing me smile, Sarah took the opportunity to grab my arm and suggested we finish celebrating our anniversary. I gently pushed her hand away and told her to listen carefully. I made it clear that she had to choose between me and Ari, and the decision was entirely hers to make. I stood up to leave without another word. Sarah called out my name from behind, but I refused to look back. Later, when I got home, I heard someone entering the security code at the front door. I assumed it was Sarah and was about to speak when a deep male voice greeted me. It was Ari, introducing himself as Sarah's friend. Sarah walked in behind him and casually introduced us as if nothing were wrong. She explained that Ari had just returned and hadn't found a place to live yet, so she was letting him stay with us for a while. She then had the nerve to ask if I minded. I glanced at Ari's face, a face I had seen 1,000 times on the big screen. I let out a cold laugh before turning toward the bedroom and slamming the door shut behind me. Through the door, I could hear Ari asking in a low voice if I was having a bad day. Sarah's voice became soft and placating as she told him I was just under a lot of stress at work and that he shouldn't take it personally. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of a hot breakfast being prepared. Sarah was busy in the kitchen wearing an apron, marking the very first time she had cooked a meal in our 5 years of marriage. Ari was sitting at the dining table wearing a brand new set of loungewear. I recognized them as the ones Sarah had bought last week, which I had mistakenly assumed were for me. Ari invited me to come and taste her cooking. With a gentle smile, Ari mentioned how much he had missed her breakfast during his years in Hollywood. I could only offer them a cold, hard stare in response. It was a shame that I had never once received such special treatment. Sarah placed a bowl of porridge in front of me and told me to stop being stubborn and just eat. She clearly thought I was just throwing a tantrum. It seemed as though she had already made her choice. I took a deep breath and called my assistant, instructing him to have breakfast ready and delivered to my office by 9 o'clock sharp. I walked out without a backward glance and called a friend of mine who was a lawyer. When I told him I wanted a divorce, he asked if I was joking and wondered if Sarah would ever agree to it. He reminded me that she had put her career on hold for an entire year at the height of her fame just to marry me. My voice remained flat as I told him that her consent didn't matter because I was finished. He simply said he understood. He asked for a month to get all the paperwork in order. After hanging up, I watched the city streets blur past the car window, knowing that this time I was truly letting go of Sarah for good. When I reached the office, Sarah's assistant had already delivered a gourmet breakfast. I didn't even glance at it before pushing it toward Lily and telling her she could have it. Lily looked a bit flustered as she thanked me, noting that it was a kind gesture from Sarah. I ignored the comment and pulled a black credit card out of my wallet. I told her to go buy some decent clothes for the screen tests next week. Lily's cheeks flushed a light pink as she carefully took the card and promised to do her absolute best. At that moment, Sarah stepped out of the elevator and caught the scene immediately. She waited with a blank face for Lily to leave before approaching me and wrapping her arms around my waist. She asked if I was intentionally trying to provoke her as some sort of revenge. I gave her a thin smile and replied that if I were truly seeking revenge, I wouldn't be giving Lily a credit card. I would be giving her the lead role. Sarah leaned her head against my chest, saying she had come specifically to see me and asking if I was still mad. Her playful affection almost made me waver for a second. However, the memory of Ari being in my home the previous night quickly returned. I asked her if she had any real idea why I was angry as I pushed her away and handed her my phone. I showed her the social media post Ari had just made, which featured their photo from yesterday. The caption read that it felt like coming home. I pointed out that she had made breakfast for him, but never for me. In 5 years of marriage, she hadn't cooked for me a single time. Furthermore, in those same 5 years, I had never once appeared on any of her social media accounts. Sarah immediately started making excuses, offering to take a photo of us right then to post on Instagram. She even promised to cook for me personally that very night. I cut her off and told her to stop playing dumb. I stated clearly that Ari had already crossed the line and she was the one encouraging him to keep pushing it. She tried to claim he was just a friend and her first love. I countered with a sneer, telling her that I had a first love too, but I would never let her wear clothes that my wife had purchased. I added that I certainly wouldn't let her move into my house or speak to her with such ambiguity in front of my spouse. Sarah stayed silent for a long moment before repeating that they were just friends. I pulled up another photo on my phone and showed it to her. It was a picture Ari had posted to a private circle showing her leaning on him while his hand was wrapped naturally around her waist. Her face went pale as she claimed it was just a candid shot. I told her to stop lying to herself because she knew exactly what Ari's intentions were and how she felt about him. Her eyes began to redden as she asked if I was simply jealous. Right then, her phone started ringing with Ari's name flashing on the screen. She answered in a soft voice, telling him she was at the office but would be back soon. After hanging up, she looked at me and said that he wanted her to make him lunch. I felt a sudden hollowness in my chest. I told her to go ahead and make plenty so he wouldn't go hungry. Sarah looked stunned by my reaction. She clearly didn't expect me to remain so composed. I repeated for her to go, and after biting her lip, she finally walked away. I sat alone in my office, watching her hurried silhouette disappear. A sudden wave of exhaustion washed over me. It seemed 5 years of marriage were no match for the return of first love. Lily knocked and entered the room with the clothes she had just purchased. She asked if I wanted to see if they were a good fit. I looked at her youthful and pretty face. A new thought began to take root in my mind. For the first time, I asked her if she would like to have dinner with me. Her face flushed instantly as she agreed. That night, the paparazzi caught Lily and me dining together. In the photos, we were sitting quite close, and I had politely draped my jacket over her shoulders. Sarah called me over 30 times that night, but I didn't answer a single one. The following day, she tracked me down on set and demanded to know what was going on with those photos. I told her calmly that if she could live with her first love, there was no reason I couldn't have dinner with a newcomer. She insisted that it was different. I asked her exactly how it was different as I let out a sneer. I told her that we were finished and to stop pestering me. Her eyes turned red as she asked how I could dare say that. I told her I dared anything, looking her straight in the eye and reminding her that she was the one who betrayed our marriage first. With bloodshot eyes, Sarah confronted me right there on set in front of the entire crew. I remained expressionless as I told her it was working hours and we could discuss private matters at home. She gritted her teeth, but eventually managed to suppress her anger. When we started filming, Sarah was in a terrible state and couldn't get through more than a dozen takes. I picked up the megaphone and told her she wasn't capturing the emotional depth of the scene. I reminded her that she was supposed to be playing a wife who deeply loved her husband but was about to lose him, not a spoiled child. She stared back at me with eyes full of pain, grievance, and bitterness. We tried again, but by the 20th failed take, Sarah finally broke down. She rushed up to me and demanded to know, in front of everyone, if I had already fallen for someone else. The entire crew stopped what they were doing, and the silence in the air became suffocating. I set the megaphone down and walked over to her, lowering my voice, but still making sure everyone could hear me. I asked Sarah what right she had to ask me such a thing. She was stunned as I pointed out that her first love was living in my house. She was cooking for him, and she was posting intimate photos of them on Instagram. I questioned how she could ask if I liked someone else, given her own behavior. I asked if this was really her professional integrity, dragging her private drama into the workplace. I turned to the assistant director and called it a day, adding that someone else would be filming Sarah's scenes tomorrow. Sarah's face went white as a sheet as she asked if I was actually replacing her. I told her coldly that this was business, and if she couldn't get her act together, I would consider recasting the lead role. I then walked off the set without looking back. When I got home that night, Ari was sitting in the living room watching television. He turned it off when I walked in and remarked that he heard I was planning to replace Sarah. I told him that I ran the production and I would replace whoever I pleased. He claimed that Sarah valued the project and cared about me as he stood up, suggesting we needed to talk. I asked him about what. He took a provocative step toward me and asked if I knew that Sarah had spent the whole day crying. I told him that it wasn't my concern. Ari laughed and said he had been right there by her side while she cried, just like in the old days. My fists clenched instinctively. He then announced that he was back. His voice was dripping with the arrogance of a winner as he asked who I thought she would choose. I told him calmly that she had already made her choice, which was why I had decided to let go. Ari was stunned, clearly not expecting that kind of response. I told him that I was moving out the next day and that the house was all his. Right at that moment, Sarah walked through the door and saw us facing off, a flash of panic crossing her eyes. She asked what we were discussing. I told her in a steady voice that I was letting Ari know I would be moving out tomorrow so they could live their lives together in peace. Sarah's face went pale in an instant. She asked me what I had just said. I repeated that I wanted a divorce, speaking so calmly and without emotion that the words hit her like a sledgehammer. She shook her head violently, refusing to agree. I told her it didn't matter whether she agreed or not as I took out my phone and informed her that the lawyer's papers would arrive tomorrow. She lunged at me to grab my phone, demanding to know how I dared. I stepped aside and easily avoided her, asking what there was to be afraid of. Sarah looked at me and then toward Ari as despair slowly began to fill her eyes. I asked her with a mocking smile if this wasn't exactly the outcome she had wanted. I told her she finally had what she wanted. With that, I picked up my pre-packed bags and walked out the door without looking back. I checked into a hotel near the office. The following morning, the lawyer delivered the divorce papers to Sarah, but she refused to sign them. Instead, she came to the office to see me in person. She sat across from me with red, swollen eyes and told me she wouldn't divorce me, pleading for us to talk. I told her there was nothing left to discuss, keeping my eyes fixed on the script in my hand. I said that if she signed, we could each go our own way. She asked if I really didn't care at all about the last 5 years. I finally looked up at her and said that she was the one who stopped caring first, not me. She stood up abruptly, her emotions boiling over as she claimed she had never stopped caring about me. I gave her a cold laugh and asked what Ari was then. She insisted he was just a friend. I asked if a mere friend was someone she would cook for or someone she would ditch her husband for just to attend a party. I pointed out that she even let this friend move into our home, which left her speechless. I told her she knew better than anyone that Ari was far more than just a regular friend to her. I told her she was enjoying the special treatment he was giving her. Tears began to stream down her face as she denied it, but I told her she knew the truth deep down. I stood up and suggested she sign the papers for both our sakes. Just then, Lily knocked and brought in the coffee I had requested, placing it carefully on my desk. Lily stepped to the side as Sarah narrowed her eyes, identifying her as the newcomer. Lily was clearly nervous as she politely greeted Sarah. Sarah looked her up and down, asking for her age and commenting on how young she looked. Lily whispered that she was 24, and Sarah turned her gaze toward me. She noted that Lily was 5 years younger than her and asked if my taste had changed. I replied flatly that at least Lily wasn't someone who acted hot and cold all the time. Sarah's expression turned icy as she asked who I was calling fickle. I told her she already knew. Sensing the tension, Lily tried to make her escape. Sarah stopped her in her tracks, stepping in front of her and calling her little girl. She warned Lily to stay far away from her husband. Lily looked between the two of us, unsure of how to respond. I stood up and walked over to Sarah, telling her first that I was not her husband and that we would be divorced very soon. Second, I told her not to take her frustrations out on innocent people. Sarah sneered, arguing that since Lily was already in the tabloids with me, she was anything but irrelevant. I looked her in the eye and asked, so what? I pointed out that if she could live with Ari, I was perfectly free to start a new relationship of my own. Sarah had an emotional breakdown and screamed that they weren't living together, claiming he was just a temporary guest. I asked her coldly if there was really any difference. I told Sarah to be honest with herself, asking if she would actually reject Ari if he confessed his feelings today. She froze as a flicker of panic crossed her eyes. That single moment of hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I sat back down and remarked that since she couldn't even decide for herself, there was really nothing left to talk about. Sarah's tears began to fall uncontrollably as she told me I was cruel. I laughed at the accusation and told her that she was the one who was cruel first. She didn't say another word before turning and leaving. Lily asked tentatively if she had caused trouble for me, but I shook my head and told her it had nothing to do with her. That afternoon, Sarah posted a status on Instagram saying that some people and things simply can't stand the test of time. The attached picture was from our wedding, but my face had been edited out. The entertainment industry went into an immediate frenzy with rumors and speculation flying everywhere. Reporters were calling my phone incessantly, desperate for an interview. I simply turned off my phone and buried myself in work. If she wanted to use this for publicity, I would let her, as the relationship was already nearing its final end. Following Sarah's post, the entire industry was buzzing with rumors of our divorce. A mob of reporters camped outside the office, hoping for a scoop, so I had security clear them away. Despite the security, some reporters managed to sneak inside. Suddenly, Ari appeared in my office and closed the door, walking toward me and suggesting we talk. I told him I had nothing to say as I kept my head down, focusing on the paperwork on my desk. Ari sat down and informed me that Sarah had spent the entire night crying. He said she was devastated, but I just sneered and replied that it was her own choice. Ari then gave me a malicious smile and claimed he knew exactly what was making me so angry. He said I felt betrayed by Sarah, so I looked up and stared at him coldly. His smile turned sinister as he asked if I knew that she had already belonged to him long before she ever married me. The veins on the back of my hand bulged as I clenched my fists and asked what he just said. Ari looked triumphant as he repeated that she had always been his. He claimed that on the night he flew to Hollywood 5 years ago, they had done exactly what I suspected. I stood up abruptly and landed a punch square on his face, sending him staggering to the floor. Blood began to seep from the corner of his mouth, yet he was still smiling. He asked why I couldn't accept the truth as he wiped away the blood, telling me I was nothing more than a placeholder. He asserted that I was the only person she had ever truly loved. I swung another punch, and this time he didn't even try to dodge. He then asked if I knew why she never mentioned me on social media for 5 years. He said it was because she was afraid of making him unhappy. He asked if I knew why she never cooked for me, claiming that for her, cooking was a special act reserved only for the person she loved. He asked if I knew why she had let him move into my house, stating that in her heart, it was their home and I was the real outsider. I began to hit him like a madman until my knuckles were raw and bleeding. Sarah suddenly burst through the door, screaming for me to stop as she rushed over and asked if I'd lost my mind. She knelt down to check on Ari, her eyes filled with nothing but concern. She asked if he was okay and promised to take him to the hospital, pushing me back onto the sofa in the process. I watched as she hurriedly helped him to his feet, never once glancing in my direction. Ari told her weakly that he was fine and that she shouldn't worry. She cried out that he was bleeding and couldn't possibly be fine, her tears nearly falling as she reached for her phone to call for help. Seeing her weep for him felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I told her there was no need for an ambulance as I stood up and brushed the dust off my clothes. I said security would take him to the hospital, and only then did Sarah finally look at me with eyes full of rage. She demanded to know why I had hit him. I gave her a cold sneer and suggested she ask her precious first love exactly what had been coming out of his mouth. Ari weakly shook his head and claimed he hadn't said a thing, insisting that I was the one who attacked him first. I looked at Sarah and pointed out that he was still lying. I told her it didn't matter who she believed anymore because I simply didn't care. As she helped Ari to his feet, she told me that she no longer recognized the man I had become. I gave her a bitter smile and admitted that I had indeed changed because I had finally seen reality for what it was. I then pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer. I told him to expedite the process because I wanted the divorce finalized as quickly as possible. Sarah's expression shifted as she asked if I was truly serious about the divorce. I looked her in the eye and told her it was my final decision. I told her it was over, and her tears began to stream down her face once again. However, my heart had already turned to ice. Some wounds, once opened, can never truly be healed. After Sarah and Ari left for the hospital, I sat alone in my office. The wounds on my hand were still bleeding, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the dull ache in my chest. Lily knocked softly and came in carrying a first aid kit. She offered to clean my wounds, and as I looked at the genuine concern in her eyes, I felt a sense of warmth that I hadn't experienced in a very long time. She cleaned my cuts with a light, steady hand and asked if it hurt. I shook my head and told her it didn't, because compared to a broken heart, these physical injuries were nothing at all. Lily hesitated before asking if Sarah was really going to divorce me. I gave a bitter laugh and clarified that I was the one divorcing her. She asked why, since we seemed so much in love. I looked out the window and remarked that some things look beautiful on the surface while being completely rotten on the inside. Lily didn't say anything else, focusing instead on bandaging my hand. Once she was done, she looked up and told me that no matter what happened, she would always be on my side. I paused for a second before smiling and thanking her. That night, I received an iMessage from Sarah asking if we could talk, mentioning that Ari was out of the hospital and she had taken him to a hotel. She said she wanted to explain everything. I stared at the message for a long time before finally agreeing to meet her at a quiet cafe. When I arrived, Sarah was already waiting. Her eyes were terribly swollen, and her face was lined with exhaustion. She noticed my bandaged hand, and a flicker of concern crossed her eyes. I told her it was fine as I sat down, asking what she wanted to say about Ari's claims. She took a deep breath and insisted she could explain. I told her there was no need as I interrupted her, suggesting we just let the past be the past. She insisted on clearing things up as her tears began to fall once more. She admitted that something had happened between them the night before Ari left for Hollywood 5 years ago, but claimed it was only because she thought she would never see him again. She said she thought that would be the final time. I listened in silence, feeling absolutely nothing in my heart. She admitted she had loved him, but insisted that since marrying me, things had changed. She claimed I was the only person in her heart. I looked up and asked why. If that were true, she had never mentioned me on Instagram or cooked a single meal for me. I asked why she had let him into our home, which left her completely silent. I told her there was no need for further explanation as I stood up, admitting that Ari was right and I was just a placeholder. She desperately grabbed my hand and begged me to listen, but I pulled away. I told her that it was enough and that we had simply lost each other. Right then, my phone chimed with a message from Lily. She asked where I was and said she had something very important to tell me. As I stood to leave, Sarah shouted from behind me, asking what Lily was to me besides a minor actress. She asked if I was really going to throw away 5 years for her. I looked back at her with nothing but disappointment. I told her she still didn't understand that I wasn't the one who abandoned the relationship. She was. I left the cafe and went straight to Lily's apartment. She opened the door in simple loungewear, her face filled with anxiety for me. She asked if I was okay, and I nodded before asking about the important thing she mentioned. Lily bit her lip and handed me her phone. She told me a reporter had approached her that afternoon, offering money for dirt on the two of us. I frowned and asked her how she had responded. She said she had refused because she didn't want to cause any trouble for me. Looking into her clear, innocent eyes made my heart soften. To my own surprise, I felt a surge of affection. I asked Lily if she would be willing to be with me. She hesitated for a moment before her cheeks turned a deep crimson. She asked if I was serious, and I told her I had never been more serious in my life. Her face was as red as an apple as she struggled to find the words. She agreed, and I reached out to gently stroke her cheek. A long-lost sense of tranquility settled into my heart, a feeling of peace I hadn't experienced in years. When I was with Sarah, I was always on edge, terrified of losing her. But being with Lily brought nothing but pure, simple happiness. I told her that from today on, she was my girlfriend. Lily gave a shy nod and reached out to pull me into a hug. Her embrace was warm and managed to soothe my exhausted heart. The next day, Lily and I arrived at the set together, and it was obvious to everyone that our relationship had shifted. No one dared to gossip, but the air was thick with tension. Sarah arrived as well, and when she saw how close Lily and me were standing, her face turned pale instantly. She approached me and said she wanted to talk. I told her there was nothing to say, keeping my eyes fixed firmly on the monitor in front of me. Her voice trembled as she asked if I was really going to be with this girl. I told her coldly that my personal life was my own business. Sarah's emotions flared up as she asked what Lily could possibly offer me. She claimed she was just a no-name actress and asked what she had to offer besides her youth. I finally looked up at her and told her that Lily could give me something she never could. When she asked what, I looked her in the eye and said loyalty. I told her that Lily's heart belonged solely to me, unlike some people who were still haunted by past loves while pretending to be devoted. My words hit Sarah like a knife to the chest. Her eyes filled with rage and hurt as she told me that I would regret this. I told her my only real regret was wasting so many years of my life on her. The statement seemed to pierce her heart directly. She stumbled back a few steps, the light in her eyes finally going out. That night, Sarah took to Instagram to officially announce our divorce. She wrote that she had realized too late she was on the wrong path, and there was no going back. She thanked me for the 5 years we spent together and wished for us both to find true happiness. The photo she shared was a solitary shot of her back, looking chillingly lonely. It wasn't long before I posted my own response on Instagram. I wrote that life is a constant cycle of making choices and being chosen, and I wish for a bright future ahead. I didn't include a photo or any extra words. The internet immediately exploded with rumors and theories, but I no longer cared. A week later, we met at the courthouse to finalize our divorce. Sarah clutched the divorce papers as tears streamed down her face. She asked me if I truly felt no regret whatsoever. I looked at her with total indifference, feeling no regret at all. I told her to remember that she was the one who gave up first, which only made her sob harder. I didn't say another word before turning to walk away. Her sobbing echoed behind me, but I refused to look back, knowing that some paths, once taken, can never be retraced. I knew that some people, once lost, are gone forever. I said goodbye to Sarah in my head, knowing that from now on, we were nothing more than strangers. Lily was waiting for me in the car and asked with concern if I was okay as I climbed in. I took her hand and told her I was fine, suggesting we just go home. Our home now belonged only to the two of us, as the one I had shared with Sarah was gone forever. That is just how life goes, with its gains and its losses. I had lost Sarah, but found Lily, and perhaps that was simply how fate intended it. My life with Lily after the divorce was incredibly tranquil. She moved into my apartment and made me breakfast every single morning. Her cooking was nothing like the elaborate and complicated dishes Sarah used to make. Lily's meals were simple and homey, but they made me feel grounded and warm inside. I complimented her on how fresh the soup tasted. Lily gave me a bright smile and said her mother had taught her that a man's stomach needed to be well looked after. This genuine care gave me a sense of security I had never known. When we got to the office, it was clear to everyone that Lily and I were now a couple. No one dared to gossip, but Sarah kept finding excuses to drop by. She sat across from me one day, claiming she wanted to renegotiate her contract for the new film. Her eyes were full of complicated emotions, but I didn't look up as I told her to take any issues to the producer. She told me she wanted to talk, her voice sounding strained. I cut her off and told her to mind her professional boundaries. I stated that our relationship was now strictly professional. Her eyes filled with tears as she asked if I really refused to even say her name anymore. I looked up at her and asked what she expected. Just then, Lily walked in carrying a tray of tea and set a cup down for me. She gave Sarah a polite nod, addressing her formally. Sarah looked her up and down, a flicker of jealousy and resentment crossing her face. Sarah asked her age, and when Lily told her she was 24, Sarah made a biting remark about how talented she must be to land a top director at such a young age. I looked at her coldly and told Miss Miller that if she didn't have any professional business, she should leave. Sarah gave me a long look before finally turning and walking away. Lily looked uneasy and asked if she shouldn't have come in. I told her not to be silly as I pulled her down to sit beside me. I told her that she was my girlfriend and she belonged here just as much as anyone else. Lily gave me a sweet smile, but I knew deep down that Sarah wasn't going to let things go so easily. Sure enough, a few days later, the tabloids were flooded with reports about my relationship with Lily. The photos they had were crystal clear. They had shots of us dining, shopping, and going home together. The headlines were increasingly sensational, focusing on how quickly I had found someone new and how much younger she was than my ex-wife. Lily looked frightened when she saw the news, worrying if it would damage my reputation. I shook my head and told her it was bound to happen eventually. The comments online were brutal, calling me a scumbag for moving on so quickly. People were saying that Sarah was such a wonderful woman and that I clearly didn't know how to appreciate what I had. Some even called her a homewrecker, saying she was ordinary and had nothing going for her but her age. Seeing these comments made Lily want to cry. She choked up and asked if she had brought trouble upon me. I pulled her into a tight hug and told her not to overthink it, as it would all eventually blow over. However, the situation escalated far more quickly than I had anticipated. A few days later, Aries suddenly made a post on Instagram. He wrote about people who abandon a loving spouse for someone new and then turn around to smear their ex. He claimed that a man without a basic sense of responsibility was truly pathetic. Although he didn't mention me by name, everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Online outrage erupted, and people began digging up Lily's personal information. Lily was subjected to relentless cyberbullying and spent every day in tears. She eventually asked me, through her tears, if we should just break up. She said she didn't want everyone to blame me because of her. I held her tight and told her to never say such things again, because we weren't going anywhere. I knew deep down that this battle had only just begun. Sarah and Ari had clearly joined forces against me, intending to drag my reputation through the mud. Since they wanted to fight, I wasn't going to show any mercy. I decided to strike back and instructed my assistant to arrange a meeting with several major media outlets. I told my assistant that I was going to hold a press conference. He asked if I was certain, pointing out that the current public sentiment was heavily against me. I replied that the negative sentiment was exactly why I needed to clear the air. I gave a cold smile, noting that some people seemed to think they could just distort the truth whenever they pleased. I was going to show them exactly what the truth looked like. The press conference was scheduled for the following afternoon, and I had my team compile all the evidence we had on Sarah and Ari. This included their intimate photos, their message logs, and security footage from the time Ari was staying in my home. On the day of the conference, the venue was packed with members of the press. I sat on the stage, facing a sea of cameras and microphones. I got straight to the point, telling my colleagues in the media that I had invited them there to clarify a few things. I noted that there were too many false rumors circulating about my divorce from Sarah. The reporters immediately sat up straighter. I started by clarifying one major point. I told them that the collapse of our marriage was not due to me finding someone else, but rather because of the interference of a third party. I signaled to my staff to display the evidence on the large screen. One after another, intimate photos of Sarah and Ari began to appear for everyone to see. There were shots of them dining alone, returning home together late at night, and security footage of Ari living in my house. The entire room erupted into a frenzy. I explained in a calm voice that all of these photos and videos were captured while Sarah and I were still very much married. I asked the room if that didn't constitute cheating. The reporters began to whisper among themselves before one asked if I was explicitly stating that Sarah had been unfaithful during our marriage. I looked directly into the camera and said that the facts spoke for themselves. I was simply making the truth public. Next, I displayed the iMessage logs between Ari and Sarah. The messages were filled with flirtatious and suggestive comments. I highlighted a message from Ari telling Sarah that he was back and would never leave her again. There was even a line about how he could never forget what had happened between them 5 years ago. The reporters were speechless. I had one final thing to add. I clarified that my relationship with Lily only began after I had already filed for divorce. I told them she was a kind, innocent woman and asked everyone to stop their malicious attacks against her. As soon as the press conference concluded, the tide of public opinion shifted dramatically. People online began to turn on Sarah and Ari as the real truth came to light. Sarah had clearly been caught off guard by my move. She showed up at my door that very night, demanding to know why I had done such a thing. I told her calmly that I had merely presented the facts. She demanded to know when I had taken those photos, and I told her I had been documenting things since the day Ari moved in. I had been gathering evidence from the start. I looked her in the eye and asked if she really thought I was foolish enough to be completely defenseless. She stood there in total shock. She stammered that I had been guarding against her from the beginning. I sneered and told her I was simply protecting myself, and as it turned out, my instincts were spot on. Sarah covered her face in agony, telling me I was far too cruel. I stood up and reminded her that she was the one who was cruel first. She had betrayed our marriage and crushed our relationship only to turn around and try to blame me. I asked her what right she had to call me cruel. Through her tears, she claimed she had never betrayed me and that they were just friends. I asked her if friends were usually found huddled together late at night. I asked if friends usually talked about what happened between them 5 years ago. I took a step toward her and asked if she was really going to keep lying even now. She was choked up and couldn't find a single word to say. She asked if I was satisfied now that everyone online was attacking her, and I told her that she had brought this entirely on herself. I told her that when she chose to side with Ari, she should have anticipated this kind of outcome. Sarah looked at me with a gaze full of pure despair. She asked if we could truly never start over. I gave her a hard, final no, telling her that it was well and truly over. Lily leaned into my arms and thanked me for clearing everything up. She admitted she had truly thought we were going to have to break up. I gently stroked her hair and called her a silly girl, reminding her that I had promised never to give up on her. She then brought up Sarah. Lily was worried that Sarah might try to seek revenge. I comforted her, saying that wouldn't happen because Sarah was currently in no position to take care of even her own affairs. As expected, Sarah and Ari quickly faded from the public eye. I heard that Ari had headed back to Hollywood, while Sarah had put all of her professional commitments on hold. Our lives finally returned to a state of peace. As we lived together, Lily became increasingly comfortable. Not only did her acting skills improve rapidly, but she also kept our home in perfect order. She suggested that I had been working too hard lately and should take a vacation. I thought about it and decided it was a great idea, suggesting we go to the Maldives. She was as excited as a child, telling me she had never even been out of the country. Seeing her pure, genuine smile brought an immediate warmth to my heart. We had an incredible time during our week in the Maldives. Lily was like a happy little bird, full of curiosity about everything around her. She marveled at how incredibly blue the water was as she pulled me along the beach. She found a shell and told me how beautiful it was. Standing on the beach, I looked at her and seriously told her that I loved her. It was the first time I had ever said those words to her in person. Lily was momentarily stunned. Her eyes immediately filled with tears as she told me she loved me too. I told her to stop calling me Director Morrison and to just use my name. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was my assistant telling me there was an emergency. He said that Sarah had attempted to take her own life in her hotel room. I was stunned and asked when it had happened. He said it was just now and that Ari had been the one to find her. They were both at the hospital. I was silent for a few seconds before saying I understood. After I hung up, Lily looked at me with concern and asked what was wrong. I told her calmly that Sarah had attempted suicide. Lily's expression shifted as she asked if we needed to return home. I pulled her into my arms and told her there was no need because it had nothing to do with us. I stated firmly that our vacation was not going to be interrupted by anyone. I told her that whatever happened to Sarah was no longer my concern. Lily nodded, though I could tell her mood had darkened slightly. That night, the internet was flooded with news of Sarah's suicide attempt. Photos showed Ari by her side, looking consumed by guilt and pain. Public opinion began to shift once again, with people wondering if I'd been too heartless. I turned off my phone, having no desire to read any more comments. I wondered if this was Sarah's final move, using a suicide attempt to garner sympathy. She was trying to make me the villain once again, but unfortunately for her, my heart had long since turned cold. Her life and death truly meant nothing to me anymore. Lily leaned against me and asked softly if I would regret this. I shook my head and told her no, because everyone has to live with the consequences of their own choices. She was the one who chose betrayal, and now she had to pay the price. I was not the cause of her pain. True closure isn't about harboring hate for what was destroyed, but finally understanding that she must walk her own path while you move toward a future so bright that you never feel the need to look back.